Hello and welcome to Artifacts, a living archive dedicated to preserving the first-person stories of queer, avant-garde, and underground culture, told by those who lived it. Today's episode is part of our series Silver Factory, an enthralling journey through Andy Warhol's factory, whose inhabitants included an array of characters from socialites to superstars and speed freaks. In this episode, we hear from Brigid Berlin, Silver Factory superstar and legendary speed queen. Born into privilege, Brigid began rebelling early, first by refusing her mother's demands that she diet, and later by her joyously flagrant style of shooting amphetamine in public, jabbing the needle right through her jeans, which led to her factory pseudonym, Brigid Polk. Her lacerating intelligence and non-stop monologues made her an ideal figure for Warhol's films, notably Chelsea Girls. Even in the years after the Silver Factory, she remained one of Warhol's closest confidants and telephone mates. Brigid was also a documentarian of her era. Her Tit Prints, trip books, Polaroids, and taped conversations form a raw, intimate portrait of the 1960s underground. Her bootleg recordings of the Velvet Underground at Max's Kansas City led to their first live album, and her conversations with Warhol became part of the Philosophy of Andy Warhol. This 1999 interview, long after she stopped all drugs, captures Brigid's demonic wit and profiles an artist who refused to be edited, even by Warhol himself.
I have all this footage. We're trying to restore it, John Gottenberg and John Hanhart, of Van Johnson, me sitting on his lap with my mother's two-way stretch on, which was the equivalent of a girdle then, and my face plastered with makeup. I was about 7 at Marion Davies Beach House in Santa Monica. And Van is teaching us how to swim, and the people that were around, Vanessa Brown, did you ever remember that name, that actress? And Sonia Henney. And you know, Ethel Merman used to come to all of our Christmas open house night parties. Joan Crawford used to come for dinner when she was Mrs. Alfred Steele. The Windsors came for dinner. Bobby Short used to come and play for the Windsors. I learned how to drink all by myself from my father's bar. When I had a Victrola in my room, I went in, everything was in a decanter. I took the Grand Marnier, I came in, I put scarves over the lampshade, and I listened to an Eartha Kitt record over and over on the Victrola till I memorized her and I could imitate her at 12. I posed for pictures with ivory soap. I petted stray dogs and I shied clear of dope. My smile is brilliant, my glance is tender, but I noted most for my unspoiled gender. I used to like men before they started mauling cuties, but now I'm more inclined to keep my mind on my duties. While tearing out a game of golf, I made my play for the caddy.
But when I do, I don't follow through, 'cause my heart belongs to Daddy.
I could go. Well, I forget them now, but I still, I practiced it over and over. I drank, I learned how to smoke at the same time. I inhaled, I held it, it hurt, I exhaled it.
And so how old were you when you did this?
I guess about 12 or 13.
About 12 or 13.
They'd be out,
Yep.
I had it all down. We were sent to the convent so that we wouldn't get communism. That was my father's favorite word. He spent his life having J. Edgar Hoover on our tail. And J. Edgar was one of his closest friends, and if Daddy was alive today, he died at 92 of Alzheimer's disease. He would, if he had ever seen the picture in Vanity Fair of J. Edgar Hoover in a dress, he would have died. If you could have told my father 30 years ago that J. Edgar Hoover was gay with Clive Tolson, he would have made me stay in my room for 6 weeks. He was on my father's right. Daddy was in the middle. Roy Cohen was on his left. Daddy bent over in the car and he said, "Joe, you're a crazy Irishman, and this fellow's a crazy Jew, and I think you ought to get together." And that was the beginning. And that was the youngest thing I ever did. I went to the Keep Offer hearings, and I was the second car in back of General MacArthur in his ticker tape parade. I was about 9. Oh no, they were famous in New York. Max Jacobson, Dr. Fryman, Dr. Bishop. There were 3 of them. And Dr. Fryman, I remember going there in my Chanel suit and having my first injection by Dr. Fryman with B12 and dehydration in it. And I was scared to death to have an injection in my vein because I don't have any veins. And I said, "Is it going to hurt?" And he pulled the Hermes scarf from around my neck and blindfolded himself and did it blindfolded. And he said, "I'm going to make you feel better than any man has ever made you feel in your life." Really. And all the people that used to go there, it was
He blindfolded himself for you, himself.
Yes. And he had white hair and he was very elegant. And his nurse, Willow, was our friend. And his treatment room in the back had a fridge with all fresh strawberries in it and ginger ale. It was like a party up there. Wow. And the pills he had this big pill jar, and of amphetamine, and he called them lavender. We all called them lavender lilies. I got so thin, but it made me shop. Oh my God, I'd leave there and we'd beeline it to Bloomingdale's. We would totally change our outfits as we went through the store. We'd just leave whatever we were wearing in a dressing room and buy the new thing, charge it to our parents. It was charge to one and send to the other.
So you went through a period where you were getting shots, and the shots would be B12.
B12, methamphetamine, Lasix, which was dehydration, made you pee a lot. And then we discovered the Max Jacobson, so we'd go to Fryman in the morning and then Max Jacobson in the afternoon.
Literally.
Yeah. And then, I had all these different doctors that I went to. And, I had a different line for each one of them. It'd be like Larry Rivers was getting it from his wife's obstetrician. And, I had like a doctor that treated all the artists, and I would trade him art for prescriptions. And I'd fill them in Bigelows, and the guy is still there that filled those prescriptions for me at Bigelow's. He's never said anything to me, but I can't help but think about it every time I walk into that, because it had a counter then, and it was a soda fountain. I got a job for the summer at the Hearst Corporation at Harper's Bazaar, which was then published at 572 Madison Avenue, which was the corner of 56th Street. But then I met this queen who was the window decorator at the Tailored Woman. And he wore pinstripe suits, and I started to go out with him, and he knew, this was the whole group of Joel Schumacher then. He was nothing but they called him a staple gun queen. And, he and his friend Jerry Morgan, they were at Delman's doing the shoe windows, and Joel would be dressing me up at night. He invented pink and orange. We lived in this was before I moved into that 65th Street apartment, before I got married. Then I married one of the queens from that group. And then I had the money, so I rented a house in Cherry Grove. And I called it Brigid Dune, and I had engraved invitations for lunch at Cartier, and I would write no bathing suits on the engraved invitations, and you just didn't write no bathing suits in Cherry Grove because nobody wore anything else but bathing suits. And I would order the poppers over on the ferry from Sayville, and David Webb lived there, and it was not to be known that Brigid Berlin was in Cherry Grove because David Webb, one of his best customers, was my mother.
So roughly when is this?
This is right before I met Andy.
What I'm confused, you had $150 million.
No, 150,000?
I mean,
that, oh, I went through that. Just went through it, and the husband left with the money. Oh, yeah, I mean, he left when the money was gone. I spent that all on champagne and seaplanes to Fire Island and... You know, at the old factory, Andy used to send me back to the couch behind the screen with his old Ewer tape recorder, reel to reel, and just make me go back there and sit and talk. And he always told me that I was going to be his all-American novel. When I told him they didn't pay anything at Harper's Bazaar, that all these fashion magazines, they only want rich kids, you know. They only want kids from good families with good backgrounds. They want volunteers.
Exactly.
And Andy loved that theory, and that's what all of us were for all those years, volunteers. And if Andy ever taught me anything in my whole life, he taught me one thing. Get a receipt. Brigid, what do you want for Christmas? Do you realize I could have had every Campbell's soup can, every Elizabeth Taylor, from the old factory when he would be painting with a rope around him and not let me smoke because of the fumes of the...
From the paint and...
And, I could have had... I'd say no, I didn't want one. I said, do you think that I could have the electric chair hanging in my living room or in any place I lived, even in the Chelsea? I said I couldn't look at it. I said I hated it. Elvis Presley, I hated him. I said I liked Cole Porter. I've never bought a rock and roll record in my life. I never saw the Rolling Stones in a concert until last year. And it was the most boring experience I ever had. And Andy took me to Michael Jackson, and I stood in Michael Jackson's concert, and I needle pointed. I did. I remember I was the only one that Andy let take pictures of his scars. And I used to go in and take them every day because I would sell them, and then when I'd sold them all, I'd have to go back and take more. He thought that was funny. So he let me take pictures. He had different things with different people. And like, I think that Andy's thing with me was I was the person that he talked about his medical problems to. Like, he would call me up and say things like, Brigid, my balls are itching. And, you know, I didn't know what to say. When I sort of split Andy and didn't want to have anything to do with Andy because he sat in the back room of Max's, I wanted to be up with the intellectuals in the front. You know, I sat and tried to be an intellectual with people like Bob Smithson and Larry Weiner, and, you know, sit and talk to Fielding Dawson, you know, and sit with de Kooning when he'd come in, you know, and screw those. Chamberlain would go to the back, but Neil Williams was one of my best friends, and Johanna Lawrence, and you know, all of that.
So did you hang out more in the front than in the back, or is it
Yeah,
a little of both?
no, more in the front. I really got, and then I would go down to Larry Poonz's at night, every night, and all drunk all night. He'd buy his underwear every day on Canal Street and just throw it out. And he'd do with his you know, doing those dot paintings, and he started with the mop, and that was when he had that place on Church Street. I remember how, I think I told you this the last time, I kind of left the back room of Max's.
Yes, yes. And would go up front,
and talk with,
Bryce
and so it was always like getting the good tapes of even all the stuff that I didn't even understand, because all those artists then, like Carl Andre and Neil Williams, we called them the heavies. You know, they weren't drinking, you know, pina coladas or margaritas up there. They were drinking shots of tequila and Jack Daniels, and you know, I just copied them right along, whether I liked it or not. You know, I just, you know, drank straight Jack Daniels and became friends with the bartenders, you know, and sat at the bar in the daytime, you know, while they all talked about abstract expressionism and subjects like irony. These are the places you would pack for to leave for a couple of days, and waiting for the connection to come, and it'd be like days waiting, and then crashing, and then, you know, somebody saying, well, it's coming this afternoon, and then it would be bad, and it wouldn't get you up there, and I mean, but see, that was all the bad side, like Jimmy Smith, the Terrors, and the Hunkies, and all those people. They were really scary.
The Hunky, you mean Herbert Hunky, or you mean, no?
Hunky from the Beat Generation.
Yeah, Herbert Hunky. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Hunky was like, he knew Dorothy Podber and those people. And then there was all the nutty names, like Jim Lively, Jesus.
Norman Billiard Balls, Binghamton Birdie.
They would be obsessed with doing their laundry, and everything was always perfect. My drawers were always perfect. Everything was always perfect. I mean, I invented cleaning with Q-tips.
It's so handy having Q-tips round the house. You can do so much with Q-tips round the house.
I couldn't stand it if the grooves in, say, the radio or anything like that had dirt in them.
Wow.
And I'm still like that. See those screens up there, those filters? I was in the Chelsea. That was all after the Silver Factory scene.
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
all in
yeah.
between.
Yeah.
That came with the Chelsea Hotel, the running around with Rotten Rita, the Turtle.
The Turtle.
The Turtle, Debbie Dropout, who was Herb Cain's daughter.
Right.
I met Rotten Rita and then was going up to Rotten Rita's. I had a crush on Rotten Rita. And then I would stay up there a lot of times, and we would just stay up for days and draw and, you know, buy magic markers and rapidograph pens, and it was like these intricate drawings.
So
I mean,
these
really,
were
they
the
were
trip
real.
books?
Yes. I mean, our own trips. I mean, I think I would win the prize on the detail. I mean, I would make so many circles with the smallest size point of a rapidograph, and then put circles inside the circle and then another circle. I mean, I would make people out of these circles, and I tell you, there wasn't an inch, there wasn't a space to put another circle or another dot. And then I lived in the Chelsea, and then, you know, they'd come down there, and we'd have Debbie.
Debbie Dropout.
Yeah. She was having an affair with Jimmy Smith.
And later
And
with
she lived
later
in an
earlier
apartment.
with Gerard.
Mm-hmm. But I had one with Gerard too. I have all those tapes of sex with Gerard. and all of his poetry to me. And Ted Berrigan. It took Richie and I like 5 hours to get out of the apartment because we had to like pack for every place that we went. You know, we were on so much amphetamine that we had to compartmentalize every single little thing and have I would have to have all of my art equipment with me and all my miniature paint sets and Winsor Newton paint sets and all my trip books. So, you know, because if you were going out, you were probably going out for a few days. And of course, it was Billy with the opera. It wasn't Andy. I mean, of course, I tried to get into Maria, you know, but, you know, Rot and Rita and Ondine were into the opera. And I mean, when Rotten had that place up in the 80s, some apartment in the West 80s, I mean, he would stay up for days and clean and I mean, he would be cleaning with his underpants and doing laundry and cleaning, and I mean, this is just what everybody did. I mean, and spend hours like getting ready. Saying you'd be someplace in an hour meant that you might get there around 8 hours later. But the whole time you were getting ready to get into your costume. I stopped speed in 1975, totally cold turkey, everything, because I started getting paranoid that I thought I had cancer because I had pains in my side. It was literally my gallbladder. I was allergic to the dye test. My doctor was the Windsor's doctor, Antonucci, as a pavilion named after him at Roosevelt, the Arthur Antonucci Pavilion. And I stopped taking speed 2 days before I went up, and he put me in the hospital, and I was allergic to the dye test for my gallbladder. I weighed 260 pounds. He came up to my room and said, "There's not a damn thing we can do for you. You were allergic to the dye test." I broke out into, I mean, like a total itching human being. They gave me a shot of Demerol to counteract it. I was sent back to my room. Antonucci came up to my room and said, "Brigid, you gotta lose 50 pounds. We can't touch you." I wouldn't go through that fat if you paid me. I walked out of the hospital. He said I might as well go home. I thought I'd stop at this little place called Filet Mignon where they had these hoagie steaks and Werner's ginger ale around the corner, and I didn't do it. I went to Versessi hardware store on 23rd Street and bought a scale. I started to fast. I lived for the magazines, and I watched television all day, and I lived to weigh myself every day, and I lost 160 pounds. And my drinking escalated after I lost the weight. That was all after the silver factory scene.
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
all in
yeah.
between.
When did you start taping, and how did you get that idea? How did that come about?
Well, you see, Andy had been taping in the 60s with the Ewer, when he'd send me back behind the curtains and just make me talk into the microphone and do those monologues. And I just sit there and I just talk. But when I started to tape, I think I had a whole historical sense to it, because that was the reason why I made each tape. Each tape was kind of like a diary. And, I mean, they weren't like Taylor Mead's Super 8 diaries. I told you that I did tape Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground upstairs at Max's, and I taped it with a mic really well, and Ahmet Ertegun produced it as a record, and it was actually the first bootleg record. And Lou used to write songs to me.
Oh, yeah?
He'd write his songs on the telephone with me, and I'd be taping this, but he actually, I didn't tell everybody that I was taping them every time they called, but I was taping them, and he would be singing, and he'd say, now here's where the colored girls come in, dee-dee, 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 you know? So I have all of those. I taped it all. I taped sex, everything. And then some days, if I had my carpet cleaned and it was still wet, I'd go out to the park and I'd tape these characters, like these homeless people then, that would give me these incredible stories. Like one believed she was Elizabeth Taylor. And I'd ask them all these questions, and I used to love to go to Bickford's and places like that, and also I'd want to go down to Little Italy because I had this fascination with the mafia, and I always thought if I went down to what are those restaurants like in Little Italy where the mob went, I'd always think I'd run into the Gambinos or something like that. I thought that was thrilling. I have 5,000 phone calls with Andy, and the philosophy book.
Yes.
It was my idea that there's two originals.
That there's two?
Two originals. If Andy called me up and was taping me, when I picked up the receiver, I was taping him. So if he taped me doing the cleaning chapter, I taped him taping me doing the cleaning chapter.
Exactly.
And that is two originals. They both start instantaneously at the same time. Only I did something very interesting with my tapes. Andy never marked any of his. He was a slob. He didn't care about the quality. I did. And I would unplug. I wanted life to be cut in to what was going on in the daytime with my tapes. So I would unplug a phone call and turn on WINS News, tape a little bit of Patty Hearst's, thing from Sing Q, and tape that. Tape a little of Barbara Walters on TV. Tape the people in the George Washington Hotel. I heard that I went held it at the bottom of the door because I thought an S&M thing was going on, and I heard this, I'm Marcus Aurelius, and I sing for my supper. And there was a girl in there. I taped it and then I called the police, and I taped that, and I said that this was, and I used to tape the bums on the street, and it was great. It would go right from a phone call all over to what was going on.
Fabulous.
So they're all like that, and they're all cataloged. A big trouble is a lot of the transcriptions got lost because I was going to have David Whitney edit them for me because I thought he was exactly my age. Was up there with David and Philip 3 summers ago. I'd taken John Waters up because he'd never seen the Glass House. And I was kind of thinking, now David Whitney would be a good person for me to do my book with, because he could read all this stuff and just tell me, cut it all, and then I could come up in the winter, he said, use the guest house, and we'd work, and he'd say, type this if he thought it was good. But I sent him all the transcribed material, not Xeroxed, and it was lost.
Artifacts is a free oral histories platform. Please like, subscribe, and visit our website, www.artifacts.movie, for an ad-free, interactive experience with bonus content. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation at www.artifacts.movie/donate. Hit the link on screen to watch another Artifacts interview.